Hello, everyone. I'm Olivia, 22 years old, and currently working as a barista at Starbucks while studying art at university. I'm about to share something that has completely turned my family upside down, and I could really use your perspective on this. My sister Victoria, 27, was supposed to marry Nathan, 28, a promising young architect. Everyone thought they were perfect together. They'd been dating for years, and it seemed like a match made in heaven. But now, everything's fallen apart in the most bizarre way possible. Why? Because Victoria banned me from their wedding, and in response, Nathan refused to marry her. The reason? My sister is convinced Nathan has feelings for me. I know how absolutely crazy that sounds, but let me explain. For context, I've never been close to my family. My sister Victoria, my dad Richard, who works in insurance management, or my mom Catherine, a former teacher turned housewife. I started drifting away when I began college, though it wasn't like there was some dramatic falling out. Since moving out for art school, I've spent most of my time either working at the cafe, creating my art pieces, or studying. During breaks, I'd usually visit my grandparents or travel rather than go home. It just felt easier than dealing with the tension at home. The thing is, I'm different from my family, and not in that typical, I'm not like them way. We genuinely don't connect. They're all about corporate success and social status, while I'm pursuing art and working at a coffee shop. Victoria's climbing the corporate ladder in marketing, always posting perfect Instagram photos of her life, while I'm the one who finds peace in creating art and making lats. While they're discussing the latest country club events, I'm thinking about my next art exhibition. We're living in completely different worlds. Family dynamics. What hurts the most is how they seemed perfectly fine with me fading from their lives. When I started distancing myself, there weren't any concerned calls or messages asking if I was okay. Victoria just kept posting her perfect life highlights on Instagram and TikTok, while my parents continued their usual routine. It was like they were relieved to have one less complication in their picture-perfect family narrative. I eventually limited my appearances to major events, birthdays, holidays, the occasions you can't really skip without causing drama. Even then, I felt like an outsider watching a performance. I'd show up, make the appropriate small talk about my interesting career choices, as my mother calls my barista job, endure the subtle jabs about when I'm going to get serious about life, and then leave. The conversations never went deeper than surface-level pleasantries. Victoria and I never had that sister bond you see in movies. She's always been the golden child, corporate success, perfect social media presence, everything our parents dreamed of. Meanwhile, I was the odd one out, the one who chose art supplies over business suits. They're not outright cruel, but their subtle digs cut deep. You know those comments that seem innocent but leave lasting wounds? Like when my mom shares Victoria's latest promotion on Facebook but conveniently forgets to mention my art exhibition. Or when my dad asks if the coffee shop is just a phase. Those little moments add up. I learned to cope by throwing myself into my art and work. At the cafe, I could be myself without judgment. My regular customers actually appreciate my latte art, and my coworkers don't question why I chose this path. It was easier to build my own world than try to fit into theirs. The Christmas party. But everything shifted at last year's Christmas dinner when Nathan joined us. For the first time in forever, I didn't feel like the family misfit. While everyone else was busy taking photos for social media and discussing Victoria's latest career achievement, Nathan noticed my sketchbook and actually showed genuine interest in my art. He wasn't just being polite. He asked thoughtful questions about my techniques and inspiration, treating my passion with respect instead of dismissal. The confrontation. I didn't think much of it at first. It was just basic human decency, something I rarely experienced at family gatherings. But Victoria was visibly troubled by our interaction. It wasn't like Nathan and I were having some deep, private conversation. We were talking about my recent art projects, my experiences at the coffee shop, and some funny customer stories. Normal, everyday topics. But I couldn't ignore Victoria's cold stares throughout dinner, which culminated in her confronting me later that night. "I know exactly what you're doing," she cornered me, her voice sharp with accusation. "You've always been jealous of my success, and now you're trying to steal my fiance." I was genuinely stunned. Steal her fiance. I actually laughed because it was so absurd. Where was this even coming from? When I told her she was being ridiculous, she wouldn't let it go. She insisted I was being too friendly with Nathan and that he was acting different around me. The whole thing was so outlandish, I didn't even know how to respond. Being the center of attention has always been Victoria's thing. She's the one with thousands of Instagram followers, the one whose engagement photos went viral in our local social circle. Our parents worship everything she does. She's their corporate success story, their golden child. But accusing me of trying to steal her fiance? That was a new low, even for her. Growing tension. I tried to brush it off like I usually do with her drama. I figured she was just being insecure or stressed about the wedding planning. But after that night, everything became increasingly uncomfortable. The distance between Victoria and me, which was already significant, turned into a complete chasm. If I tried to speak to her, she'd either give me one-word responses or act like she was too busy checking her social media. During family gatherings, she'd cling to Nathan like she was marking her territory, all while documenting everything for her perfect online narrative. It was exhausting to watch. Nathan, however, maintained his normal, friendly demeanor, treating me with the same respect he'd shown at Christmas. Family reactions. What really gets under my skin is how easily my family sided with Victoria. My mother, Catherine, would give me these loaded looks every time I was in the same room as Nathan and Victoria, while simultaneously posting about their perfect couple moments on Facebook. My father, Richard, usually absorbed in his insurance reports, started making pointed comments about family loyalty and knowing your place. Everything became this passive-aggressive dance. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I've never been one for drama. I prefer the quiet focus of creating art, or the simple satisfaction of perfecting a latte design. Why would I suddenly develop an interest in my sister's fiance? We barely interacted outside of family events. The whole thing was completely irrational. The engagement news. A few months later, I learned about Victoria's engagement through my grandparents. Yes, you heard that right. I wasn't even directly informed that my own sister was getting married. Finding out through my grandparents felt like a punch to the stomach. You know those moments that confirm every insecurity you've ever had about your place in your family? This was one of them. Even though I wasn't expecting some elaborate invitation with calligraphy and roses, though that's exactly what Victoria sent to her social media friends, I thought she'd at least tell me herself. I mean, we're sisters, right? Despite everything, despite the distance and the drama, I'm still family. But apparently, that was too much to ask for. When I heard about the engagement, I kept quiet. I initially thought maybe she was just too busy with wedding planning and her social media announcements to remember to tell me. I know that sounds naive, but I was still giving her the benefit of the doubt. I thought she'd eventually call, or at least send me a last-minute invitation. But days turned into weeks, and there was nothing but silence. Well, nothing except for the constant stream of wedding planning updates on her Instagram and TikTok that everyone but me was invited to see. The phone call. Then came the unexpected phone call from Victoria. I hadn't actually spoken to her since that bizarre accusation over Christmas, so seeing her name pop up on my phone caught me off guard. I was in the middle of sketching during my break at the coffee shop when she called. I answered, trying to sound casual, as if my own sister hadn't been completely ignoring my existence. After a few awkward minutes of small talk about her latest marketing campaign successes, she dropped the bomb. "I'm not inviting you to the wedding." I fell silent, my pencil frozen mid-stroke on my sketchbook. Even though I wasn't particularly looking forward to attending what would undoubtedly be an Instagram-perfect wedding spectacle, hearing her say it out loud still stung. When I asked why, her response was absolutely ridiculous. "I don't want you there because Nathan has feelings for you. It will just be awkward." I actually laughed out loud, causing a few of my regular customers to look over curiously. The whole situation was so absurd. Nathan had no feelings for me. He was just the only person in our family circles who had treated my passion for art and my career choices with respect instead of dismissal. "Have a great wedding and a happy marriage," I said, and hung up. I went back to my sketching, trying to pour my frustration into my art rather than dwelling on the drama. Whether or not I was part of her perfect social media wedding narrative didn't really matter to me anymore. Victoria and I were living in completely different worlds, and I had long accepted that. But I needed to vent and maybe get some outside perspective. Am I the only one who thinks this whole situation is insane? The rehearsal dinner drama. Yesterday was absolutely chaotic, and I need to write this down while it's still fresh. I was having a typical Thursday evening, working on some new art pieces in my apartment while sipping my favorite tea. Perks of being a barista. You learn to appreciate good beverages. My phone suddenly started blowing up. At first, I ignored it, focused on the watercolor piece I was working on. But within 10 minutes, I had 7 missed calls from my dad, Richard. My father never calls more than once. He's the type who assumes if you don't answer, you're busy with something important, like a real job, as he'd say, and he'll try again later. 7 calls meant something was seriously wrong. When I finally answered, his voice was shaking. I'd never heard him sound like that before. "Olivia, you need to come to the venue right now," he kept repeating like a broken record. When I asked what was wrong, he just said, "It's about Nathan and Victoria." His voice was so desperate that it actually scared me. But here's the thing. Did they really expect me to drop everything and rush to help after all the drama, accusations, and being explicitly banned from the wedding? I told him exactly that. "Dad, remember? I'm not invited to this wedding." Victoria made that very clear. "Olivia, please," he replied, his insurance executive composure completely gone. "Nathan is refusing to go through with the wedding unless you're there." That stopped me in my tracks. My mother, Catherine, was already calling on the other line, and when I switched over, she was crying, actually crying. She kept saying, "Your sister needs you," as if she'd forgotten how they'd all treated me these past months. It was surreal hearing her talk about sisterly love and family loyalty when they'd been perfectly fine excluding me until things went wrong. The truth comes out. Then Victoria called, her voice a mess, barely coherent between sobs. Apparently, Nathan had arrived at the rehearsal dinner and immediately asked where I was. When Victoria told him I wasn't invited, he didn't explode in anger. Instead, his reaction was worse, quiet disappointment. In front of their friends, the wedding party, and both families, he declared he couldn't marry someone who would treat their own sister this way. Through her tears, Victoria recounted how Nathan said that after watching how they treated me, he couldn't be part of a family that would reject someone so completely. He looked at my parents and said, "You're all just like Victoria," adding that he wanted no part of such toxic behavior. The request. Between sobs, Victoria started outlining this elaborate plan for me to come to the venue and explain that there was just a big misunderstanding, that it was my idea not to attend the wedding. "We can fix this," she kept insisting. "Just come and tell Nathan you chose not to come to the wedding. Tell him you were never excluded. Olivia, please. I can't lose him." The audacity was breathtaking. After months of treating me like some man-stealing villain, after explicitly telling me I wasn't welcome at her wedding because her fans might have feelings for me. After making me feel worthless in my own family, she wanted me to lie to save her relationship. Standing firm. I let her cry on the other end of the line for a long time, my hands absently sketching in my notebook. Art has always been my way of processing emotions. Then, as calmly as I could, I said, "I won't lie for you, Victoria. You're now facing the consequences of your choices to ignore me and treat me like I didn't exist. Fixing it isn't my responsibility. He believes in you." She almost screamed. I replied, "Maybe he trusts me because I've never given him a reason not to. Maybe he's questioning who you really are because of what he's seen in how you've treated me. Either way, I won't be coming to the venue, and I won't tell lies to salvage your reputation." Aftermath. She was still pleading when I hung up. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, a calming ritual I learned from my time at the cafe, then turned off my phone completely and sat down at my easel to really process what had just happened. Over the next few hours, my phone kept lighting up with notifications when I occasionally checked it. There were voicemails from my parents, missed calls from Victoria's friends, and texts from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. The entire family seemed to have mobilized to try to get me to clean up Victoria's mess. But you know what? For the first time in my life, I was absolutely certain that staying away was the right thing to do. Nathan had seen through their behavior on his own, not because of anything I said or did, but because of how they treated me. He had come to that conclusion himself, and honestly, that felt like the most complete validation I could have hoped for. Finding peace. I went to bed that night without checking my phone again, and I slept better than I had in months. Let them deal with the consequences of their own actions for once. I'm done being the family scapegoat and pretending their subtle digs at my career and life choices don't hurt. This morning, my grandparents, the only family members I still talk to, told me that Nathan isn't returning any calls from Victoria or my parents. He's apparently told his family that the wedding is definitively off. My parents are frantically trying to contain the damage to their social reputation. Victoria is inconsolable, and I'm just sitting here in my studio, finally at peace with my decision to maintain my distance. I know this is long, but I had to get it all out. Thank you to everyone who commented on my previous posts supporting my decision to keep my distance from my family. You were right. Sometimes the best thing you can do is step back and let others face the consequences of their own behavior. Background context. Many of you asked about my early years and why I've been distant from my family for so long. I didn't go into it in my first post because it's a heavy story, but with everything that's happened, I think it's time to share some of it. The core issue is that I struggle with social anxiety. Growing up, I always knew something was different about me, but I could never quite explain it. My parents, Richard and Catherine, are traditionalists who believed mental health issues were just excuses. "You need to toughen up," or "you're just being dramatic," they'd say. If I ever showed signs of anxiety or a panic attack, they'd label me as weak or lazy, as if I was choosing to feel this way. Looking back, I can see so many red flags. The art class incident. When I was 15, I had this major presentation in art class. Having to stand in front of 30 students was a social anxiety nightmare, even though I was presenting my own artwork. I couldn't sleep the night before, and I felt physically sick that morning. I begged to stay home and told my parents how I was feeling. My father's response: "Anxiety doesn't stop real life, Olivia. Stop making everything such a big deal." I ended up having a severe panic attack right in front of the class. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped my artwork. My voice kept cracking, and some kids started snickering. The room was spinning, but I couldn't leave. Instead of offering comfort afterward, my mother just said, "See? You made it through. All that drama was for nothing." That was the day I started seriously pursuing art as my escape. At least my drawings wouldn't judge me. The perfect sister. Everything was made worse by Victoria being the perfect sister. She was student body president, debate team captain, and everything else I couldn't be because of my anxiety. During her big social media-worthy parties, people would comment that I was the weird sister who never came out of her room. I once overheard Victoria telling her followers on a live stream, "Yeah, she's just antisocial. She thinks she's too good for everyone else." College turning point. My life changed when I got to college. My first semester was a complete breakdown for me. Being away from home, adjusting to new social situations, and trying to balance my anxiety while attending art classes became overwhelming. I remember sitting in my dorm room one night, having a panic attack while staring at an unfinished canvas, feeling like I was drowning. My roommate, bless her heart, saw something was seriously wrong. She practically dragged me to the student counseling center. That's where I met Dr. Martinez, the first person who truly listened to me. She didn't tell me to toughen up or dismiss my feelings. Instead, she helped me understand what was happening. After a few sessions, Dr. Martinez suggested seeing a psychiatrist for a proper diagnosis. When I received that diagnosis of social anxiety disorder, it was like finally putting a name to the monster I'd been fighting my whole life. It wasn't just being dramatic or seeking attention, as my family had always insisted. It was a real condition, and more importantly, it was treatable. The breakthrough. Therapy opened my eyes. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that my family's behavior wasn't just unsupportive, it was actively harmful. She taught me about setting boundaries, advocating for myself, and recognizing toxic patterns. That's when I started deliberately creating distance from my family. The real punch to the gut came when I tried to explain my diagnosis to my parents. My mother, Catherine, actually said, "These doctors are just trying to make money by labeling everything a disease." Victoria immediately chimed in, rolling her eyes as she looked up from her phone, saying I was just using big words to justify my antisocial behavior. Last Thanksgiving, before all this wedding drama started, I made one final attempt to explain things to them. I'd prepared an entire presentation about social anxiety, complete with research and statistics. My father, Richard, interrupted me mid-sentence. "Olivia, when are you going to stop making excuses and start living in the real world? Your sister manages just fine on social media." The realization. That's when I finally realized they would never change. They would never try to understand. They had a fixed image of me as the difficult child, the dramatic one, the problem. And you know what? Realizing that was strangely liberating. It made it easier for me to stop seeking their understanding or approval. Looking back, I can see how this pattern led directly to the wedding situation. My parents' quick acceptance of Victoria's story without questioning it, and Victoria's immediate jump to believing I was stealing her fans. It's all part of their long-held belief that I'm the one who causes problems and needs to be managed. Nathan saw through all of this. He observed how they handled me, how they dismissed my art career, how they minimized my feelings, and how they used me as the scapegoat for everything. And he called it out for what it was: toxic behavior. Unlike everyone else in my family's social circle who just accepted their version of reality. Moving forward, I guess what I'm trying to say is that this wedding drama wasn't an isolated incident. It was the result of years of family dynamics where I was consistently cast as the villain, the problem child, the one who needed to be fixed. Maybe that's why Nathan's decision feels so validating to me. Someone else finally saw what I've been experiencing for years. I've spent too many years trying to change how my family sees me, to gain their understanding, to win their acceptance. I'm done with that now. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is accept that certain people, Even family members will never understand or accept you as you are. My art is selling well online now, and my regular customers at the cafe appreciate my latte art. I've found my own community who values both my creativity and my authenticity. That's worth more than forcing myself to fit into my family's narrow view of success. 1 month later. A month has passed since everything fell apart, and I need to share the final chapter of this story. What started as wedding drama has evolved into something I never could have predicted. When Victoria's wedding was called off, she completely lost it. She somehow got hold of my new phone number and shared it with everyone she knew. Suddenly, I was bombarded with hundreds of hateful messages from strangers, her friends, and distant relatives. The messages ranged from guilt-tripping to outright intimidation. The escalation. Then came the vandalism. Classic Victoria. She used to do this to girls she didn't like in high school, only now she was targeting me. It started with eggs on my car. When that didn't get the reaction she wanted, she escalated. I lost count of how many times I found my mailbox destroyed, my car vandalized, or my apartment door covered in nasty notes. The final straw was when she slashed all 4 of my car tires and left a threatening note in her distinctive handwriting. During all of this, my parents Richard and Catherine deliberately ignored Victoria's actions. Girls will be girls, or you need to be more understanding of your sister's pain, was their standard response to every incident. Even after I showed them security camera footage of Victoria trying to break into my apartment, they dismissed it as Victoria just wanting to talk. Legal action. Thanks to this amazing Reddit community, especially those who suggested I install security cameras and document everything, I was prepared. The lawyer I consulted informed me this wasn't just family drama. It was criminal harassment and vandalism. We built a solid case using witness statements, video evidence, photos, and hundreds of threatening messages. The legal resolution. When my lawyer presented our evidence, along with the cease and desist letter, Victoria finally realized she'd gone too far. The security footage of her attempted break-in was particularly damaging. She tried to negotiate through her own lawyer, offering to pay for the damages if I dropped everything. But this wasn't about money. It was about accountability and consequences. The court case moved swiftly and decisively. Victoria was charged with attempted breaking and entering, criminal harassment, and vandalism. She received a suspended sentence of 1 year, mandatory counseling, and a permanent restraining order. The judge was particularly harsh, given the premeditated nature of her actions and the substantial evidence of her escalating behavior. Parents' reaction. My parents' response to the verdict was predictable. They accused me of being heartless for ruining your sister's life over a few pranks. When I told them that Victoria had repeatedly harassed me, damaged my property, and tried to break into my apartment, they actually suggested that I should just move away if I felt unsafe. That was the last straw. I knew I'd never speak to them again. Civil settlement. The civil lawsuit was settled out of court. Victoria had to pay for all the damage she caused, plus damages for emotional distress and lost wages. Her social media smear campaign had cost me several freelance art commissions. More importantly, the settlement included a non-disparagement clause that prevents our parents from acting as intermediaries or flying monkeys anymore. My lawyer said Victoria and my parents' concerns about their country club reputation played a big role in the quick settlement. Turns out their worry about what their social circle thinks far outweighs their usual commitment to doing the right thing. New beginnings. Since then, I've moved to a new apartment in a secure building with constant surveillance. My social media accounts have been deactivated. All my contact information has been completely updated. My regular customers at the cafe have been incredibly understanding of the situation. One of them who heard about my story and was impressed by how I handled it even offered me a commission for a series of paintings for their new gallery. The most unexpected outcome of all this? For the first time in my life, I feel free. I'm not weighed down by my family's expectations and criticisms. I'm no longer the scapegoat. I'm just Olivia, creating art, making lats, and living life on my own terms. I'm neither the dramatic one nor the difficult child. Healing and growth. The Reddit community who guided me through the legal process truly changed my life. Your advice about documentation and security measures was crucial. Your encouraging comments kept me going when I started to doubt myself, and your stories of similar experiences made me realize I wasn't alone. Remember, sharing DNA doesn't give anyone the right to mistreat you. Sometimes, walking away and letting toxic family members face the consequences of their actions is the healthiest path forward. It's not about revenge. It's about setting boundaries and demanding respect. My social anxiety is improving with therapy, though it's still there. Turns out a lot of it was tied to the constant criticism and gaslighting I experienced growing up. Who knew removing toxic people could be such effective treatment? Final thoughts. This chapter of my life is truly over now, and I won't be updating anymore. I'm focusing on my art, my work at the cafe, and building a new network of chosen family for support. Thank you to everyone who supported me and followed my story. You gave me the courage to leave and the strength to stand up for myself. They say living well is the best revenge. I'd say knowing you finally stood up for yourself is the best closure. I'm no longer anyone's scapegoat or victim. I've taken control of my life, and I'm never looking back.